I'm Steve Marshall, artist and pastor on staff at Willowbrook United Methodist Church. I always enjoy sharing my illustrated messages. I've always believed that art speaks to the heart, and that the combination of art and the spoken word can make that message more memorable. So with that in mind, let's watch and listen to a familiar story from the book of Genesis. I'm reading from Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. Now the snake was the most cunning animal that the Lord God had made. The snake asked the woman, "Did God really tell you not to eat fruit from any tree in the garden?" "We may eat the fruit of any tree in the garden," the woman answered, "except the tree in the middle of it. God told us not to eat the fruit of that tree or even touch it. If we do, we will die." The snake replied, "That's not true. You will not die. God said that because he knows that when you eat it, you will be like God and know what is good and what is bad." The woman saw how beautiful the tree was and how good its fruit would be to eat, and she thought how wonderful it would be to become wise. So she took some of the fruit and ate it. Then she gave some to her husband, and he also ate it. As soon as they had eaten it, they were given understanding and realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and covered themselves. Temptation. That one word conjures up all kinds of images, doesn't it? It's a word that is part of our daily experience, a word that summons feelings of guilt and shame over those temptations that we have succumbed to. And we all have. It's a mark of our human existence, a trait that can be traced back to the very beginning, a man and a woman, and a story of forbidden fruit. The familiar story of Adam and Eve is a story of rebellion against God, of yielding to temptation, and ultimately of paradise lost. It also marks the beginning of that eternal human struggle between good and evil. An old Cherokee Indian told his grandson of the struggle within. "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside us all. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, humility, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about it for a minute, and then he asked, "Which wolf wins?" The grandfather replied, "The one you feed." Now that story does not tell us everything about our struggle with sin, but it illustrates the problem which the Apostle Paul described in Romans chapter 7, verse 21. "So I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand." Like Paul, we struggle with knowing what is right and actually doing it. Therein lies the temptation. Our first parents lived in perfect bliss, nothing to hide and no fear. The weather's ideal, they need no clothing to stay warm. The animals are friendly, they need no protection from attack. The ground is soft and pleasant, so nothing is necessary to ensure that their feet are not damaged. But these external circumstances are minor compared to the significance of being naked without shame. They feel no humiliation, no guilt, no grief, no regrets. They have no secrets to hide and no past to shame them. But that all changes once they eat the forbidden apple, and this paradise is lost. Actually, the Bible doesn't identify the forbidden fruit as an apple, although as late as the 17th century, the word apple was used to describe any fruit other than berries. When tomatoes were first introduced in Europe, they were known as love apples. But throughout the centuries, the apple has been the forbidden fruit and the symbol of temptation and sin. Now, the thing about temptation is that it always offers some kind of pleasure. Consider a fish caught on a line. The bait was tasty, too good to resist. The problem, of course, is the hook. Satan gives an apple and takes away paradise. The pleasure in the bait is no less real when it hides a hook, but neither is the hook less painful because it is hidden. Temptation is best resisted when one considers the cost of rebellion, when we compare what we may be gained to what may be lost. But unfortunately, we are all too weak when it comes to resisting temptation. We rationalize. We say to ourselves, it's not really hurting anyone. It's only this one time. No one will ever know. What real harm can it do? And so we give in. We take a bite from the apple. But the pleasure is fleeting, and the taste soon turns bitter. Even though the serpent offers the forbidden fruit, Eve has already crossed the line. She has come willingly to the tree, and she only needs the justification that the wily serpent offers to complete her transgression. And so Satan goes to work. He stirs in Eve self-pity. He casts doubt on God's goodness. He denies the need for gratitude. He exaggerates the severity of the restriction. He deceives. Here is his primary tool: lies and false doctrines. If God were good, Satan says, he would withhold nothing from you. But since he denies you the fruit of this tree, he must not love or trust you. Later, when confronted, she blames her decision, her momentary lapse, on the serpent. The devil made me do it. Well, we may excuse our failings by blaming the devil or anyone else we can, but the truth is that we make the decision. We sin of our own accord. Certainly the temptations we face come from outside, and there is a certain malevolence in our universe, cosmic powers, spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places, as Ephesians puts it. But in the end, we submit to temptation, sometimes willingly, almost eagerly. Other times we try to resist, but eventually we bend and finally break under pressure with a reluctant sigh and a sense of foreboding. So how do we best resist the temptations, great and small, that we encounter on a daily basis? Well, first we have to realize that, as John Piper once said, sin gets its power by persuading me to believe that I will be more happy if I follow it. The power of all temptation is the prospect that it will make me happier. We all want to be happy, don't we? That is a universal human characteristic, and there's nothing wrong with it, as long as the happiness we seek comes from God. God promises us all that we need, an abundant life filled with joy, but that happiness comes from trusting in God's goodness. It is when we start looking elsewhere that we run into problems. We also have to realize that there is no sin in being tempted. Even Jesus was tempted. The sin is in giving in. The sin is in opening the door when temptation knocks. But is it even possible for us to resist temptation? The answer is yes, although it is never easy. The first step is to seek God in prayer. Prayer can help us to resist temptation. The night Jesus was betrayed, he told Peter to pray so that you will not fall into temptation. But if we do fall, we know that God is faithful. He will not let us be tempted beyond what we can bear, and God will provide us with a way out. This is a promise from God that gives us strength to resist and overcome temptation in whatever form it presents itself. In addition to prayer, remove the source of the temptation if that is possible. Take the time to think through the consequences. And finally, use your willpower. With God's help, you have it within you to just say no. And then stick to it. Paul reassures us in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. But remember this, the wrong desires that come into your life aren't anything new and different. Many others have faced exactly the same problems before you. And no temptation is irresistible. You can trust God to keep the temptation from becoming so strong that you can't stand up against it. For he has promised this and will do what he says. He will show you how to escape temptation's power so that you can bear up patiently against it. So lean on God for strength and trust that he will be with you to give you all that you need to resist temptation and to overcome the urge to take that bite from the apple. Amen.